The United Nations is calling it a catastrophe and a potential humanitarian disaster. The situation in the Syrian city of Aleppo is deteriorating after regime airstrikes killed nearly 200 people in the last week. That's according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. That's including at least 50 people from a strike on a children's hospital supported by Doctors Without Borders. Well, the violence has all but ended an already fragile ceasefire. The UN Special Envoy to Syria, Staffan de Mistura, is trying to revive peace talks. And he says that at the moment, the truce is hanging by a thread. In the last few moments, we've spoken to Hassan Katan, an activist in Aleppo. Here's what he told us.
Aleppo City and its people are facing a holocaust. For more than 8 days, the city has been witnessing ongoing airstrikes by Syrian regime and Russian jets. The recent airstrikes had targeted most of the neighborhoods in the city, and yesterday we witnessed the heaviest airstrikes hit the city. 2 days ago, an airstrike targeted directly a field hospital in Aleppo and killed the last pediatrician in Aleppo City.
Well, Zeina Awad is in Gaziantep on the Turkish-Syrian border and is following this for us. Zeina, give us the details then of exactly what is happening in and around Aleppo.
Well, we understand that the last 48 hours have been the most violent since the cessation of hostilities was declared back in February. At least 70 people were killed in Aleppo, including in that attack that we've just heard about at the hospital. And the doctor who was killed was referred to as Dr. Wasim very fondly by a group of Syrian journalists who knew him personally, whom we met. They told us that it was his personal conviction to never leave Aleppo, because if he left, he would say, who's going to look after their children? Now he's gone, and the campaign of violence that we're seeing, the airstrikes and the bombing, are being conducted by both regime with Russian air cover as well as rebel groups.
So with the situation deteriorating like this, where does it all leave the efforts to try and revive those peace talks?
Well, you know, the UN Special Envoy, Staffan de Mistura, himself called the cessation of hostilities, quote, barely alive. And that's a big admission from a man who worked really hard to keep, you know, a positive tone and a brave face in the last couple of weeks when we saw the HNC, the Syrian opposition, pretty much walk out of their talks. They said that they downgraded it, but their leadership was gone. And the Syrian regime kept representation, but didn't really concede much at the table. So at the moment, what we're seeing is an intensification of violence on the ground and really a complete breakdown of the talks. Now, Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General, has called on Russia and the US, the two superpowers, to put pressure on the different parties to this conflict, to bring them back to the table. But, you know, that's a bit difficult to see or to kind of visualize, because the US has made it clear that its main goal in Syria at this point is security driven. It's about containing and defeating Daesh. And in fact, Barack Obama himself, the president, said he'll be deploying 250 more special forces to help moderate rebel groups achieve that goal. Russia, the other party of this, is very involved itself militarily, and it continues to give cover to the regime in its advances. So how these two countries, these two superpowers, will be able to exert pressure on those fighting on the ground is very unclear.
And as all this continues, Zeina, thousands of refugees continue to flee Syria into Turkey. Now, it's 5 years on Friday since the first group of refugees arrived fleeing from that Syrian conflict. You've met one of those first arrivals. What can you tell us?
Indeed, it is 5 days today, and it was difficult for the young lady that we met to picture that, to imagine that. Her name is Ravda Noor Juma. She's a 20-year-old Syrian student studying political science. You know, she's fluent in French and Turkish, and she's relatively speaking a success compared to other refugees here. But it's been a long and difficult journey for her and her family. They left their tiny village in the province of Idlib exactly 5 years ago and entered Turkey on the 29th of April. And it was a long, difficult journey under the bombs, and there is not a day that passes without Syria being on Ravda Noor's mind. Here's what she had to say.
I was expecting the situation in Syria wouldn't last for this long, that it would end and we would all return to Syria and embrace it once again. The sad thing is to say it's been 5 years, so far from Syria. I really miss my town, I miss my house, I miss my room, I miss everything in Syria. But I can also say this is all in the past. I don't deserve to live through what I lived through. I have lived outside my country for 5 years. I don't have a home to live in. I miss seeing my room. I miss hanging my own pictures on walls made of stones. Of course, I'm grateful to Turkey for standing with us, but it's also very sad. I wish that all the world helped Syria. It's been 5 years.